Welcome everybody back to Velo Sound. We got another interesting Sunday interview for you, and today we are talking with somebody that a lot of people in the black metal scene deeply admire. I can only refer to my friend Ralph from Cologne's Finest in Ulfa. He always talks highly about our guest Omar from a lot of projects in Holland. Today we will talk mostly about his solo project, Iskandr. So Omar, thanks for being on the show with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So Omar, where are we catching you right now? Where are you?
I'm in my home. I'm in my house right now, chilling in my room. I was listening to records and cleaning some stuff and just had a
Then of
pretty
course
nice
the
day.
question must be, what have you been listening to?
Today, I was listening to the Birds, the Notorious Bird Brothers. Super good record. I love the 60s psychedelic sound that they have, combined with country stuff.
A little bit of rock and roll and everything.
Yeah, it's really good.
So Omar, I always have the feeling that you are kind of a workaholic. Is that just my impression, or do you really like to work a lot?
I'm actually, I don't think my friends would describe me as workaholic, because I generally actually like to hang out and chill and don't do a lot of stuff. So,
which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what people mean when they say this is that they see that I produce a lot of music and do a lot of stuff with this. But I don't know. It's even not something that I work on day in, day out usually. I mean, it's something I think about a lot in my day-to-day life, but not something that I have so much time for to do all the time. So no, I actually wouldn't describe myself as a workaholic, but maybe yeah, I can get why people think I'm maybe a bit more productive in my music output than others.
That is definitely something on which I based my assumption, because you have a highly productive and also quality-wise a highly professional and really well-kept set of stuff that you do. You know, so much productivity coming from your way. And one of the things that we have to talk about, of course, is Iskandr, who just, I hope I pronounced it correctly, who just released a one-off single called Glass. How did that track come to life?
Well, first off, thanks for the compliment on my musical output. Iskandr, I don't know if even I pronounce it right. It's a name. It's an Arabic in origin, so probably I'm also pronouncing it pretty shitty for an Arabic speaker. But Iskandr. Glas was actually a composition that I made when writing the album that I released last year called Vergezicht. I wrote it in the same time, and I also recorded it during the same recording sessions, but in the end I decided to keep this a more minimal and acoustic track, and since it turned out to be pretty long, I thought, no, this shouldn't end up on the record, but just be released as a standalone song, because I thought it was good enough, but not as part of the record, because then it would be just needlessly long as an album. And actually, it's something that it's not really a tactic that I'm super aware of, but it's something that happens every time I make an album, and then I have some leftover stuff, and some of it is I feel is good enough, but just doesn't fit the album as part of it. So I released it as like an EP later. So I did it for every album with Iskandr that I did. actually had kind of a similar way that it was developed.
So when this track comes from the same recording session as Gelder Support, right?
No, as Vergezicht, the last full length that I did, that was released last year in end of September.
So what also strikes everybody who listens to Kleiss is probably the kind of structure, the kind of instrumentation that you use. To me, I have a feeling of it's very close to nearly classical music in a way. It has some very interesting instrumentation, and it always seems a little outside of modern times, if I may say so. That is not a coincidence in your work, isn't it?
No, I guess it's something that I consciously, it's something that I really like and admire in other music, and something that I think fits the mood of what I try to do with Iskandr very well. Hopefully, I guess it's you can call it like neoclassical or something. In a way, it has some more elaborate chords and picking and pretty melodramatic chords and harmonies. I don't know. Maybe it's a conscious decision to do this, or it's just something that quite naturally comes out when I pick up a guitar and just start playing and writing stuff. Then this is obvious. This is something that just happens. Something that I like, what do you mean with the coincidence?
Well, what always strikes me is when I listen to your work, and I always try to describe it as, it feels to me as if there is an historian doing black metal. You know, somebody who's very interested in historical sounds, structures, and then he decides to turn it into black metal. But not classical or true Norwegian black metal, however you want to call it, but into his own version. So would you mind if somebody called you the historian of the black metal guild?
I wouldn't mind. I don't think I would describe myself as such. I do have a huge interest in history, and I find a lot of inspiration in it. I also find a lot of inspiration in what people's views on history. Mm-hmm. So not per se in a scholarly academic way what exactly happened, what's actually in the archives of the historical record, but just what do people get out of a sense of being connected to a bigger history than themselves. And that can mean a lot of things for different people, but that's something that I'm always interested in, and also interested in looking into myself to see what I feel when I think about for instance the medieval times, Middle Ages, or the early modern times in Dutch history. It's not something that I admire or something that I really celebrate, but it's something that's interesting to me. And the same for instance, the way deeper in history, in Roman times, prehistoric times. It's something that I try to move around and incorporate in my work, but not in a, I don't think it's in a super celebratory way, but just in a, I think it's a fruitful source of inspiration for music, and especially for metal music, which has been like very interested in the gothic and the romantic and stuff since Black Sabbath, since the beginning.
So do you even consider Iskandr a black metal project?
Well, in the beginning, definitely. when you listen to the first records, it's undeniably black metal. Back then, I thought of the term obscure heathen black metal to describe it, and by now I've let the obscure tag fall away, because the latest stuff doesn't sound so obscure anymore. It's actually pretty proud and open, and like very it's pretty pronounced. It's not obscure the way in lo-fi, super dungeony, far away, reverbed out sounds. It's way more direct and triumphant, I think. So obscure didn't make sense anymore. So, but yeah, I think even the when you listen to my latest album Vergezicht, it's pretty. There's blast beats, there's shrieking, there's tremolo picked guitars, big chords. There's no palm muting. It's pretty. It's pretty obviously inspired by black metal music, but in my own way, I think, yeah.
So when I listen to Iskandr, it turns to me that I think the production that you've already hinted at, the production is also getting, not wanting to use the term better, but I think it's getting clearer or more straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely has to do with me just developing my own skills also, because I record everything and I write everything, and since the second album, Euprosopon, Mink from Fluisteraars has kindly joined me and performed the drums, because I really can't drum at all. But he's super good, and I just tell him how the song goes and send him some demos, and just a little bit later we're in the studio and he just does it super quickly, right exactly as I had it. Sometimes he comes up with a little different part for some things, but generally it's the way I write the songs. And but we have a kind of a similar way of looking at music and writing music, even though our bands are pretty these bands are pretty different sounding. They are different projects, but it's easy to work together. But since he joined, I think also the sound of the band is bigger, because you can do more with when you have a good drummer. You know.
You also mentioned that you are interested in Dutch history without being celebratory of it.
Yeah.
Which also hints at that you look at Dutch history from many different points of views. And then, of course, the question must be, which parts and which time zones of Dutch history do you think are to be looked at more positive than others? Which things could be celebrated and which could not?
That's a very big question. But I mean, well, in general, I just the Dutch nation as it exists. Just, I mean, for a long time, it was just basically a collection of provinces that's mainly defined by its ability to create a colonial empire, and that's, well, something that's to me I'm extremely not proud of. It's something that I feel deserves more attention and research, and it's something that we have to be aware of. Well, I mean, in another sense, every time in history is you know, you have oppression and those who resist it, and you have exploitation and those who resist it, and you have you have people who want to use, well, the military might or whatever to achieve whatever goal, and it's not so much that I think if not, I'm now speaking a little bit as a historian, even though I'm not really a professional in this field at all. But if I can say so, it's like there's no time in history that we can be really proud of, and then another time that we should be ashamed of. Like you just have to everything. Every time has an extreme amount of different situations at the same time, and a lot of complexities. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be found in every history where people have resisted exploitation and oppression in different ways, and that's something that's always super inspiring.
So when I get that, then you mean that you like to celebrate some kind of not only Dutch, but in general human strife for freedom.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into pretty serious philosophical territory, which is always a bit of a difficult place to be when you're coming from the context of a music interview, because generally, when let me just say, like when I generally when I listen to interviews or read interviews with musicians, a lot of them are pretty dumb, me included. So it's always a bit difficult to get into these kinds of topics about the human strive for freedom when discussing this. But yeah, I mean, freedom is a relatively it means a lot of different things throughout the humanity. So I mean, if you mean freedom from oppression, yeah, I guess, yeah. But yeah, it really depends how you define freedom.
Definitely, but when we look at the overall common definition of freedom, aka not being chained to any kind of oppression, any kind of prosecution, then I guess that is something that you would totally agree on, right? That is something that can be celebrated. For example, the Dutch strive for independence in the 16th and 17th century. In general, something to be proud of, I guess. When we then think of what you already mentioned, the Dutch building a colonial empire all over the world, using their economic freedom and their economic powers in order to enslave and occupy and dominate other people, not something to be proud of, right? So that, just like you said, it's always the complexity of things.
Well, right, and I mean, without really getting into a big discussion about it, but the Dutch yearning for freedom in the 16th, I mean, it really can't be viewed separate from the will to expand and be able to have their own colonial empire instead of the Spanish one. I mean, it's really an inseparable issue. It's not something, yeah, but it's a very complex topic, and not really something.
It's very interesting to get into these kind of contexts. Mm-hmm. Let's get back to the music that you're writing for Iskandr.
Yeah.
When I listen to, for example, Vergezicht, or also Het Graaf, or Kleiss, it always to me sounds as if the tracks, first of all, were written on an acoustic guitar. Is that just my imagination, or is there really something to it? Maybe not for all tracks, but for some tracks?
Well, I think what generally, it's just a general thing. If you hear an acoustic guitar in the finished recording, it's probably written on an acoustic guitar. And when you hear an electric guitar in the final recording, it's probably written on the electric guitar. For me, because usually I write different stuff with those instruments, and usually I end up using the instrument that it's written on, because then when I have a picking part on an acoustic guitar, usually it's for me very difficult to hear it in another way than being played on an acoustic guitar, and it's just something that I stick by when I write it like this. I mean, it happens a little bit that I write something and then it turns out it's better on one or the other. But usually when what's on the finished recording, it's usually how I write it also. So for Vergezicht, when it's a riff on an electric guitar, it's probably written like this. Yeah.
Several months ago, Iskandr was turned into or you said to now be ready to perform your songs live. Does that also indirectly imply that the live staff that you will have on stage will also be involved in writing new material?
Well, no. Actually, so indeed, I wanted to turn Iskandr into a live playing entity as well, because there's a little bit of a backstory to this. We played the Rotterdam Redux Festival, which was a streaming edition of the regular Rotterdam festival, with Solar Temple, which is a band that me and Mink also do. Back before we played this festival, we were also just a studio recording outfit. We had a demo and a full-length album out by then. And Walter, the director of Rotterdam, asked us because he really liked the album, and he said to us that we talked to him before, and he said that he was so interested because you could hear that it was a black metal record, but we both have, me and Mink both have also a big fascination with 70s music, 60s music, a lot of psychedelic stuff, krautrock stuff, those kinds of bands, Hawkwind, and Walter said, yeah, it's so interesting to see a black metal band incorporate these elements like this. And then he asked us to do a commissioned music piece for Roadburn, and he said, you have 100% free, you're totally free to do what you want, but what I want to ask you is, I'm such a fan of what you guys are doing with black metal, incorporating all these elements, and I'm just so curious to hear what would happen if you would focus on these elements even more, like try to deepen this inspirational source, and try to see what will happen, and if you need musicians for it and stuff. So he was really supportive in that way, and actually we thought it was a very interesting proposal. So we went to work and just started making music, but kind of like left out the idea of it having to have any elements of black metal left. I mean, if we would have come up with a part that really demanded to have a black metal feel, then we would have done it. But in the end, we were actually quite inspired by this proposal and just created something very new. And we found out that we, by really altering the way that we usually played our music, we came up with a way to perform like a really psychedelic 70s space rock set with just two people.
Which was very heavy, if I remember correctly. But
yeah, it was quite, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. it was just a very fun experience, and so it kind of led me on a path to think about what to do with Iskandr if I ever were to perform live, because actually I quite liked the idea of turning it into something very different for a live stage, because I really didn't feel like assembling a band around me and just learning everybody the songs and just performing the material that I already had live. Maybe I'm gonna disappoint some of your listeners, or maybe not. Maybe I'm gonna interest them. I hope so. But my idea now is to develop a kind of a solo performance piece. It's that I'm gonna play some shows in the autumn for. I've written a completely new set of music, and I'm hoping to also turn it into a proper record soon. But for now, it's also nice to first just play these songs live and see how audiences will react and stuff. It's gonna be different, and I think quite different than a lot of what people are used to expect from a black metal band. But I just thought it's interesting that you have a lot of black metal solo projects. It's almost like a cliche to have a solo project, but you don't see a lot of them live as a solo project. There's some that I've seen and that I was really interested in, and also a bit inspired by.
Panopticon is one that comes to my mind always.
But he plays with a band, right? I've seen him play with a band.
But I think he also writes everything himself. That's what I mean.
Yeah, true. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he does. But I think I've saw him with a full, like what I explained.
He has a complete band when he's on tour.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't see a lot of them with just themselves.
True.
And just try to find a way to do it, you know. And still, there's some examples. I will send you maybe some in the chat later, because I don't I can't remember the band names off the top of my head. Nuit Noir comes to mind, but it's quite something a little bit different also.
When we talk about your project, there is also something that comes to my mind very often, and I'm really looking forward to your recording. You seem to have a fascination for churches, and that is something that I could see Iskandr perfectly in. You performing in a church. Would that be something that you would be up to?
I don't think there's a lot of musicians, let alone black metal musicians, who would say no to a performance in a church. Mm-hmm. It's something that, I mean, there are venues, and the acoustics are not really suited usually for fast and loud music. But I mean, I've seen some performances in churches, and it was also always magical. It just really works. So yeah, for sure, I would be up for it. Yeah.
So it will be interesting to hear where you are playing your new set. As I said, if there is any church owner out there, you need some interesting music in your church, call Iskandr. But churches also seem to have another kind of importance for you, because on Prosopon you had a cut-up cover of a church.
Yeah.
And on Glass you have a picture of a church window as the cover for the digital release. That's not a coincidence, right? That is, churches seem to have a fascination for you.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's something that's also very common within this music scene. But yeah, the churches, they are just apart from what you think about religion and the belief systems that were the source of these buildings, it's something that just feels very inspirational. It's some of these structures were built, like the first people that started building them wouldn't be alive to see the finished product.
No.
It's just something that's a culmination of a culture and of a people, and you see that's true for any big religious structures like that throughout the world, and they're always something of a pinnacle of a human achievement of at that time. So it's they're always extremely interesting and always inspiring, because they make you think about stuff that's outside of yourself and outside of daily life, and whatever that may be. In the past, it would have been described as God or the godly, the holy, and in other traditions, it means something else. But it's and in the West now, I mean it means different stuff as well. But it's just something that's visually striking and very interesting. And like I said, it kind of, to me, it feels like a portal. Those kinds of buildings and all the gates and the windows and the pillars and stuff, they're kind of a portal towards this historical thinking, like the sense that you are in a place that has very, very, very deep roots, going back to ages ago, and not even something to be that necessarily inspires any proudness or particular affiliation for this everything that happened in this history, but just the sense that there's been many lifetimes before yours, and there will be many more.
When you are talking about roots, then we also have to talk about the region where you and your projects are coming from in Holland, which is called I hope I pronounce it correctly, Gelderland. One of your EPs was even called Gelderse Poort. With my little knowledge of Dutch, I guess that this is either the portal to Gelderland or the harbor.
Yeah, it's the gate. It's basically what it means. Yeah. And you're pronouncing it pretty well. It's probably quite difficult for people who are not Dutch to pronounce the of Gelderland.
For all our listeners, I have to admit that I have a little advantage. Being from Cologne in the west of Germany, our own dialect isn't that far away from Dutch. And in our colonial dialect, we have a word which is called poort, porta, or the ports, the ports, the door. So that wasn't that far away from me.
Right.
But when I looked it up, and I think I looked it up correctly, you are from Nijmegen, right? Or you live in Nijmegen?
Well, I grew up in Nijmegen.
And isn't that on the very, very close to the German-Dutch border?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So is there a connection between Gelderse Poort and Nijmegen? Is that for you a gate to Gelderland?
So you have the Rhine River.
Yes.
And right at Nijmegen, or like 20 kilometers east of Nijmegen, it makes a sharp turn westwards towards the west of the Netherlands. There it splits in half. The biggest body of water goes into what we call the Waal, but it's basically the Rhine. And another part goes into the Neder-Rhine, which means the lower Rhine.
Yeah.
And that flows a little bit north of Nijmegen towards Arnhem and Wageningen. At this area, there is actually from the second to last ice age, there's a elevated landmass. There's quite some hills and stuff, which is quite for Dutch for Dutch people. It's quite high because the rest of the Netherlands usually is extremely flat. But there's actually some points in this area which reach like 90 meters above sea level, which for somebody that's from Amsterdam, it's enormous.
It's a mountain.
Yeah. But so you have on both sides of the Rhine River, where it flows into the Netherlands, you have this hilly area, and the Rhine cut it in half. And this area is called the Gelderse Poort because it's kind of resembles a gate. When you enter the Netherlands from the Rhine, you have these hills on both sides, and that's where you enter the Netherlands and enter Gelderland when you flow downstream. So that's what's called the Gelderse Poort. And there's some nature reserves, old farmlands in the lower laying areas around the river, and usually forested hillsides on the other side. And yeah, it's a beautiful area, and it's something that really when I'm there and when I'm at the river and I see the hills or the other way around, it makes me think of being home, which is doesn't necessarily always involve being at your house, but just a place where I grew up and I spent a lot of time in my youth. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So, have you ever thought about really going away from that region?
Well, actually, I am. I'm now residing in Utrecht, which is in the center of the Netherlands. Yeah. I'm not currently living in Nijmegen, even though my family still lives there and my friends and stuff. So I visit often, but I'm now not currently in this area, which is also what kind of inspired me to write the Gelderse Poort EP, because it was right around the time that I left. So it was kind of a time of me to reflect, like what it means to be home or not be home, and to leave the place where you grew up. And yeah, it's kind of it's kind of a nostalgic, but also not. Just dealing with those feelings.
But I guess that your acknowledgement of the roots that you had or have in Gelderland, that is something that did not only come up when you left. I guess when I looked at your oeuvre, we'll also come to speak about something else, what you did with Turia. There seems to be a lot of love for the region, literature, culture.
Sure.
How did that come to be?
Well, I think the interest has always been there. Even when I was growing up, I really enjoyed reading about history and reading about the way that I was always fascinated, for instance, when I was learning about the Roman Empire in like preschool, you know, when I was I don't know what to call it in Germany, and that's just basisschool, basic education until you're like,
or primary school.
Yeah, I think primary school, like until you're like 11, something like this.
Primary
right?
school.
Yeah, so you have this, and then you learn about the Roman Empire, which is so fucking long ago, and then there's, but that you see that exactly the border of this empire was at Nijmegen, and then you hear about
was the river. It was
Yeah,
variety.
yeah,
Right?
and it's why Nijmegen was founded like as a imperial outpost, and they were trading with the local tribes and stuff like this, and then I was already extremely fascinated, like, whoa, this was here, and and then the teacher would tell us like, yeah, you know, this and this hillside, that's where their big fortress would be, and yeah, it's just something that kind of also lives in this city a lot, because it's the oldest city in the Netherlands, because yeah, it was already founded by the Romans, and they're very proud of it. So there was this big celebration when it turned 2,000 years old, you know. And it's just something that we, I think everybody that grows up in Nijmegen really knows about this city. So it's just something that's always been interesting for me, and it feels very natural to when you start to make black metal music, and you see all these bands that are looking at their own histories and their own past for inspiration, be it Norwegian or Swedish or whatever, German, French, then it feels very natural for your projects to think, hey, what's around, what's something that I grew up with, what's something that speaks to me in this way. And yeah, it feels pretty natural to include it. Yeah.
We have already mentioned Gelder support very, very often, and it's also the name of the title track of that EP, and the second track on that EP was one of my favorite songs of that year, Het Graf,
Wow.
The Grave, if I translate it correctly.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And it's also a family project, right? Because your dad is doing the vocals on it, isn't that?
Yeah, it's true.
How difficult was it to get your dad onto the record?
Yeah, well, it took some encouragement, but I think it was I kind of I ambushed him a little bit because I already had I was at their home, and I had some sneakily brought some recording equipment, and I already had
looked at by accident. I got a recording studio with me.
yeah, some very simple setup, kind of like what I'm using now, actually, and because he once told me about this Dutch poet Rijnvis Veit, who wrote the poem that's performed on the music, and I found this poem by this poet. It's pretty old, and I thought it was really good and very evocative. It's difficult for people that don't speak Dutch to understand it, but even for Dutch people, it's very old style of Dutch.
18th century, right?
Yeah. So it's very archaic, but I really enjoyed it, and so I thought this is the perfect, because I already had the music, but I didn't really know what to. It needed something else, and then I thought, oh, it needs a spoken word poem. It would fit very, very well, and I right away thought of this poem that I had read earlier, and then I thought, well, who else to ask but the person that introduced me to this poet? So I kind of ambushed him, and he said, well, I don't know, I don't know if I have a speaking voice and stuff like this, but I convinced him quite quickly, and we just started recording. I told him, don't think about it too much. He had to read it one time to know the meter, you know, the tempo of the sentences. But in the end, it's an old style of poem, so everything rhymes very well. It's very well thought out with the meter, so it didn't take a lot of time. We just did it, and then yeah, I had to splice it up just a little bit to fit it on the parts. But there's not a lot of editing or something. It's just I had to make room for the big loud part in the middle, and that's it basically. Yeah.
How did he react to the final result?
He liked it. He was a bit how do you say surprised by. He said, "Well, I didn't know my voice could sound so musical." And I told him, "Well, that's the magic of music recording. You can edit the tonality of stuff a little bit, that make it a little bit more pleasing for the listeners' ears. That's how they do it with every instrument." And he was like, "Well, okay, I never really thought about it like this." So yeah, I think he thought it would sound very dry and boring and not really blend in with the music. But yeah, that's what we do when we mix music, So.
And of course, when we speak about Gelderland, we also have to talk about the record that you did with Flüsteraars, with you being a part of Turia, and
right.
together with Flüsteraars, the Ort.
Yeah.
Can we expect the second part of it?
With those bands, you mean?
Yes, the Ort Part 2. Or something similar.
I don't know about the Ort Part 2. It's not something that's on our plans right now. I think we was a very nice project that we did. And
really good split.
Thanks a lot. We're also pretty proud of it because we thought the whole concept around it was something that we spent a lot of time thinking about it and developing how it should turn out. So it's basically the Oort is a very old Dutch word of a place where two rivers flow into one. So it's kind of the opposite of what happens at the Gelderse Poort, where the Rhine splits in two. But our Fluisteraars are more from the north of this area, so they're from around Ede and Wageningen and Arnhem, and we are from the Waal, so it made sense to call it something where both rivers would metaphorically flow into one again to make one record together. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to do a second part for this.
Not maybe for that, but could you imagine doing a second collaboration?
Perhaps, I don't know. I mean, not right now. It's not something that I would say like, oh, I will never do this, and then in 20 years people would point to this interview and say, ha. But if
anybody in 20 years pins back to this interview, then
well, we did a good job then. No, it's I think Fluisteraars have a lot of stuff up their sleeve still, so people can expect a lot from them, but not a collab with Turia at the moment. No.
So I also took this as kind of a bridge to go to talk about Turia.
Sure.
When will we get new material?
Not soon.
Not soon. Okay.
Yeah.
How? But there is another question connected to Iskandr and Turia. How did you know if an idea was better for Turia or for Iskandr?
Usually, when I write a riff, or I'm playing on my guitar and writing stuff. Maybe it's a riff, maybe it's just a chord progression, or maybe it's a certain melody or something like this. Usually it doesn't take a long time before I know where I want to use it. So it's just there's just a instinctual thing about it that it's not something I think about for a long time. It just feels very logical most of the time to me. But I mean, I think a lot of people have said to me that they can usually hear when I'm involved in a project, like, oh yeah, there's some clues that make it a little bit typical, something that you're involved in. But usually they also say that they understand why it's compartmentalized in different projects, that they definitely have a different vibe, a different a tone to them. And it's not just in the artwork or anything. I mean, usually there's some pretty big musical differences. But that's, to me, this is also something that I to me it's very logical. So when I'm writing something, it's pretty easy usually to pinpoint it. But I mean, it did happen sometimes that I wrote something for one, and we were trying something in the rehearsal space and writing something, and then we felt like, this is not working very well compared to other stuff. And then I tried it out with another project, and it turned out to be a very way better fit. But I think that's maybe true for like very, very small percentage of what I'm doing usually. Yeah, it's not something that happens often, that I have to switch it around in between projects.
When we have been talking about Turia, then I would also at least quickly know something about the following 3 projects that you have been involved in. What is the current status of Lubert Das?
Yeah, Lubert Das is still active, just without me. I left the band in what was it, 2019. They're still my friends, and they're still part of Haeresis Noviomagi and stuff. But to me, I also started to play live shows with Dol, another Dutch dark rock band. And when I was asked to come play with them, well, they are a very active touring live band. So my agenda was extremely filled up with shows. And I just felt it would be fair, I would do a disservice to my bandmates to keep on playing in the band, because then, like so many times when they would have been asked to play a certain show, I would have to say no, I can't, because I'm on tour with Dol, and it's just unfair to them, because they would be better if they have somebody else who can dedicate more time to this. So I left the band, and another friend took over the bass and vocal duties. I teach him the songs, and they had the first couple of performances the last couple of years with him. I think they played they played a Sinister Purpose festival in Leipzig, and they are going to play with Vetboens and Alkerdale in Antwerp pretty soon. I don't know the exact date,
October.
But yeah. So this band is still active. Just I'm not a active part anymore.
So what about Nusquama?
Well, it's inactive at the moment. We did a record, and we did a record. Thanks a lot. We are also pretty proud of it, and we did a whole couple of shows around it. We did some shows in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and we had a lot of fun. but it's a band that's comprised of people who have so many other projects and bands that when we were trying to find time or inspiration to think about doing something new, we had to come to the conclusion that at the moment it's not feasible to continue as a writing or performing band, because it's just people have. I mean, we're all getting. It sounds stupid, but we're all getting older in a way that we have more responsibilities with a family and jobs and house and stuff like this. So it's getting more difficult to be in a rehearsal room every weekend. So you have to.
And then the last thing, which we already indirectly talked about, is Solar Temple. Is there anything that we can expect from Mink and you doing, record-wise, touring-wise, anything?
I mean, so we did this Roadburn Redux performance.
Which was a nice one.
Thanks again. That's gonna be released hopefully sooner rather than later. But as we all know, the record industry is pretty fucked at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be more news on this, but it was always when we did the performance, we were quite pleased with how it turned out, and we managed to make a nice, good mix of it, and we're very pleased with the result. So it was always our intention to release it, but it's just it's something that takes time, and especially nowadays when you have finished everything, the whole production is done, then you have to wait a year for vinyl to arrive. So we have to be patient still, but it's something that we're working on. Same goes for the performance that we did at this year's physical actual Roadburn together with Dead Neanderthals, our friends from Nijmegen. It's something that also we thought turned out pretty well, and so that's also something that's in the works to make a release from this. We're gonna perform this piece again on the 8th of October in Nijmegen at Doornroosje. There's a pretty nice one-day festival lineup, and we're gonna do this performance again in a club setting.
Do it 2 weeks later at Doornroosje.
During Soul Crusher, you mean?
No, just joking.
Yeah. I get what you mean. It's something
exactly,
this is how it turned out.
All good.
I don't know what to say.
All good. And I wanted also quickly to talk about Haeresis Noviomagi, the label, so to speak, that you are running. One question that I would like to know is, like, what must the band have to become a part of Haeresis Noviomagi, or is it a closed circle?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a label. It's very unlike other labels, I guess. It's just a collection of bands from our friends, from our friend group. So what does a band need to have to join? They have to be our friends, which sounds ridiculous, but it's when we started out with Luberdas and Turia. With Luberdas we made a demo cassette, and we did it ourselves, and it felt nice and interesting to keep this production, to just design everything ourselves and sell it ourselves, and keep it close to us. And that's so when we started Turia a little bit later than Luberdas, and we had releases for both bands ready, we thought, well, let's just release it ourselves on cassette again, sell it again. Back then we did it, people emailed us and they PayPal'd us money, and we sent them a cassette. That's basically, I mean, that anything that it's not very far from how we do it now, even though we made a website and stuff to make it a little bit easier to handle all this, because but basically it's the same principle. It's just ourselves and releasing the cassettes, but by now we developed relationships with bigger record labels that could put out CDs and vinyl and
Eisenwald, right? Yeah.
Right, but also Amor Fati Productions in Germany, and also Altare Productions in Portugal. And we had also a pretty good working relationship with Fallen Empire Records, something that a label that doesn't exist anymore, but they put out a lot of interesting stuff, including the last full length of Libertas.
What struck me when I looked up the discography of Haeresis Noviomagi is that usually you had a year with 1 or 2 releases, like 2021, following a year with several releases, like 2020. Now, This is 2022, and we have not seen anything from Haeresis Noviomagi, nor from any of the bands involved. Must we be afraid?
I don't think you have to be afraid of anything. But yeah, I mean, it's maybe a cliche also by now, but just COVID put a lot of stuff in the dirt, and it's difficult to be as productive as before. But there's definitely music coming, with at least with Solar Temple and with Iskandr, but not. I don't think there's gonna be physical releases this year. Yeah. So in that sense, maybe people could be afraid, but it's when you do a lot of stuff yourself, it's extremely time consuming.
Definitely.
That's the main. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a takeaway from this whole interview. It's just time wise, you know, and to be musically productive, you have to have time and also decision-making skills, I guess.
So, first of all, thanks for all these interesting answers, but of course we cannot end an interview for Veil of Sound without our infamous quickfire round.
Right.
So, I'll give you 10 questions, always 2 alternatives, and you have to choose one of them and maybe give a short explanation why.
Okay, is there a time pressure, or is it something that I can...
Don't think too much.
Okay.
Let's start with something simple. Hawkwind or Motorhead?
Ooh, Hawkwind.
Okay.
But it's something I listen to more often. That's maybe the explanation, but this is a really difficult one.
Bathory or Mayhem?
Bathory, 100%.
I would have guessed that one.
Yeah.
Birds versus Stones?
Birds. Yeah. There's a tendency here, right? A little bit.
No. It's just I find it interesting to see.
No, I mean in my answers, it's quite.
No, Bathory. I think it fits more to what you what your musical output is, and Birds. It's just because we spoke about it.
Yeah, sure.
Coming to your Dutch roots, Rembrandt versus Van Gogh or Van Gogh.
Ooh, Van Gogh. Yeah, it's more. It's a really difficult one because it's so incomparable. So different what they want to achieve. But just I think
they
Van
are
Gogh.
comparable in one aspect, though. They both liked to paint themselves.
Right.
Captain Beefheart or Sir Lord Baltimore, as I know that you like your 70s music.
Ooh. I think Captain Beefheart.
The German in me has to ask, Can versus Kraftwerk.
Ooh. Can.
That would have been a very easy one because they're from my hometown. Cassette versus vinyl.
Vinyl. It sounds weird for somebody that has a cassette label, but I enjoy the size of vinyl also with the artwork and.
Yeah.
But both are preferred to CD for me.
Okay. Also to streaming?
Yeah, for sure. I don't stream a lot of music.
Amsterdam versus Rotterdam.
Ooh. Well, I think Amsterdam, if it would have less tourists.
Okay, that is a good answer.
But I think in daily life, I still prefer Rotterdam. Yeah.
Okay. Two more. Writing and recording versus touring.
Writing, recording.
Last one, as we spoke about churches. Baroque churches or Gothic churches?
Gothic, 100%.
Okay.
But can I suggest Romanesque churches?
Yes. Which one would you then choose, Romanesque or Gothic?
Romanesque.
Because they're older?
Yeah, and I really enjoy their simplicity compared to the Gothic ones.
That's true. That's definitely true. Omar, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for those lots of interesting answers. And of course, thanks for the music. Everybody listen to Kleiss, listen to everything that he put out with Turia or with Iskandr. Omar, thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot for having me. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Have a nice evening.
You too.
All right.